Hello, and welcome to our study on the book of Revelation at the Grandville Church of Christ. We had some difficulties last week in chapter 17 with our technology, so I wanted to do a quick summary video of what we see in Revelation 17, which is a very critical chapter. It unlocks much of the book if we can understand what's happening in Revelation 17. And two of the things we're going to look at are these questions. Who is the great harlot? And number two, who is the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns? And we're going to learn their identity in this chapter. I would encourage you to read chapter 17, verses 1 through 6, which talks mostly about the great harlot. When John sees this woman, the vision of her, he greatly wonders. But we see clues to her identity in these verses. First of all, in verse 1, we see that she sits on many waters. And we're going to see what that means as we get to the end of the chapter. We see in verse 2 that she has this effect on the kings of the earth, and they commit immorality with her. And those who dwell on the earth were made drunk with the wine of her immorality. So she's having this effect on kings and on all of the people of the earth, and in a very negative, ungodly way. We see in verse 4 that she's clothed in purple and scarlet. She's adorned with gold and all kinds of precious jewels. So she is wealthy. She is royal. Verse 5, on her head is written a name. And he says the name is a mystery. The name is Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. And we might look at that and think, well, there you go. The great harlot is the city of Babylon. But notice that this is a mystery. And we're going to see that this is not the city of Babylon, which God had already judged hundreds of years before. This is not Babylon, the city. And I'll show you clues as to why that is as we go along. But we see about this great harlot in verse 6 that she is drunk with the blood of the saints and the blood of the witnesses of Jesus. So she's a persecutor of the people of God. She's killing the followers of Jesus. So there are a lot of clues here. But when John sees this woman, he's wondering greatly what this is about. And thankfully, in verse 7, the angel says to John, "Why do you wonder? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and 10 horns." So the angel is going to tell us what this is all about. And as we've seen in the book of Revelation over and over again, a lot of times if we just keep reading, many things will be explained. And so let's read about who this woman is, first of all. If you look down at verse 15, "And he said to me, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues." So the woman is depicted as sitting on many waters. Well, what does that represent? The waters are all of these nations, these peoples, these tongues. So the woman rules over all of these nations and peoples and tongues. And then come down to verse 18. Who is the woman? The angel says, "The woman whom you saw is the great city, which reigns over the kings of the earth." Notice the tense of the verbs here. The woman is the great city, which reigns, present tense, which reigns over the kings of the earth. So we have to ask ourselves, what was the great city at the time that John writes that was reigning, as he writes, was reigning over the kings of the earth? And the answer to that, of course, is Rome. The great harlot is Rome. Some have said, well, maybe the great harlot here is Jerusalem, but Jerusalem did not reign over the kings of the earth. In fact, Jerusalem was being reigned by the Romans at this time. The great harlot is the city of Rome, ruling all over these peoples and nations and exporting her immorality to all of these kings and all of the people of the earth, and of course, persecuting the saints of God and shedding their blood. Well, let's ask the question then, who is this beast? We're introduced again to the beast in verse 3. He sees the woman sitting on a scarlet beast full of blasphemous names, having 7 heads and 10 horns. We originally saw this beast coming up out of the sea in chapter 13. And if you back up a little bit even into chapter 12, we saw that the dragon, who is the devil, Satan, he wanted to make war against the people of God. And the way that he does this is through the beast. The beast has 7 heads and 10 horns. And again, thankfully, the angel says, I'll tell you what this is about. And so let's listen and hear what this is about. Look at verse 8. The beast that you saw was and is not and is about to come up out of the abyss and go to destruction. Very important clue here to unravel this book. The beast, John says, or the angel says, the beast was and is not. So as John is writing this, he's writing down the vision. At that time, the beast is not, and we have to reckon with what that means. The beast was and is not, but the beast is about to come again out of the abyss and goes to destruction. We see again that Jesus wins, so it's already determined the beast will be destroyed. Well, look at verse 9. Here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. This is a tremendous clue for us. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. The woman is the city of Rome, as we just saw. And Rome was said, it's always been known in history, that Rome was the city on 7 hills. Rome was built on 7 hills. Even the people back then in the first century knew that. And it's known to us today. Rome is the city on 7 hills or 7 mountains. So the 7 heads are the 7 mountains on which the woman sits. But there's another meaning to the 7 heads, as we see in verse 10. And they are 7 kings. So we don't have to speculate. The heads mean this or the heads mean that. The angel is telling us. The heads are the 7 hills on which the 7 mountains on which the woman sits, and they are 7 kings. Now here's another huge clue in verse 10. 5 have fallen. So as John writes, 5 of the kings of the Roman Empire have fallen, which is very interesting that it helps us to really determine when John wrote this book. 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other has not yet come. And when he comes, he must remain a while. If you look at a list of the rulers of the Roman Empire, starting with Augustus, we don't start with Julius because he was not an emperor. History doesn't regard him as such. He was not known as such. He was part of the Roman Republic. Starting with Augustus, we have Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, Nero. 5 have fallen. So when John writes this book, 5 of the emperors of the Roman Empire have already come and gone. Then we have number 6, Galba, number 7, Otho, number 8, Vitellius, number 9, Vespasian. These 4 emperors were, after the death of Nero, were vying for power and struggling for power. And to make a long story short, Vespasian ends up becoming the emperor. The other 3, Galba, Otho, and Vitellius, They only ruled for a matter of months at the most. And we can look back in history and see that they were uprooted. They were ousted by Domitian, who was Vespasian's second son. All of that lines up very nicely with Daniel chapter 7, where we have the fourth beast, which is the Roman Empire, and we have a little horn come up, an 11th horn, and uproots 3 horns. We see that in Scripture, just predicted so amazingly, hundreds of years before it happens. And then we see in history that Domitian did indeed uproot 3 of the horns. And so what we have in Revelation 17 is that John just doesn't deal with these 3 other emperors, Galba, Otho, and Vitellius, because their reign was so short, yes, but also because that's what God said would happen, that one of the emperors would uproot the other 3. So John doesn't deal with the uprooted 3. And so we have 5 emperors that are fallen. That takes us through Nero. And as John writes, one is, that leaves us with Vespasian, who's the ruler as John writes. There's another one coming, number 7, who must remain a little while. That was Titus. And then look at the next statement. Verse 11. The beast which was and is not is himself also an 8th and is one of the 7, and he goes to destruction. So there is an 8th ruler that is coming, and he is one of the 7. He is an emperor like the other 7. And in this emperor, we'll notice that he goes to destruction. It's certain. It's clear. Jesus will be victorious. But in this 8th head that comes up, the beast is back. Remember, the beast was and is not, and he's coming again. The beast was. That's Nero. We know that Nero was a terrible persecutor of the Christians. And when Nero died, many no doubt thought that there were going to be better times, that things were going to be better, things were going to be good, and they were for a time. History tells us that Vespasian and Titus, they didn't persecute Christians as a matter of policy in the Roman Empire. So the beast was under Nero, and he is not, as John writes, but the beast is coming back again. And that's talking about Domitian, who was terrible and cruel, and he persecuted the Christians heavily. And the Christians to whom Jesus is giving this message, they needed to know this. There were things that were happening, that were going to happen, that must soon take place. The time was near, and they needed to be ready to stand against the dragon's assault against the people of God. Things were quiet right now, but the beast is coming back again. And the people at that time, even, they believed that Domitian was, as one author wrote, a bloody arm of Nero. Many thought that Domitian was so much like Nero that Nero had been resurrected. The beast was back again. Remember in chapter 13, the beast had one of the heads that was slain, and it comes back to life. You see that played out in history. The beast goes away when Nero dies, but he comes back again under the 8th head of Domitian. So the beast is the Roman Empire. The heads are the 7 hills on which the woman sits, but they're also these 7 kings. And an 8th is coming. Well, what about the 10 horns? Let's look at that briefly. The beast had 7 heads and 10 horns. Look at verse 12. The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but they receive authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour. These have one purpose, and they give their power and authority to the beast. These are likely 10 client kings, or we might call them sub-kings or sub-rulers, rulers of provinces under the Roman Empire. So they're ruling under the beast, but note that the 10 horns and the beast, they hate the harlot. Look at verse 16. And the 10 horns which you saw and the beast, these hate the harlot and will make her desolate and naked and will eat her flesh and will burn her up with fire. So we see in history that part of the fall of Rome was due to these other kingdoms turning against Rome. But in all of this, I want to encourage you that God wins. The Lamb wins. And the people needed to know what was about to happen, things that would soon take place. Don't seal up the prophecy. These things were going to be happening soon. And they needed to know that they have to stand firm. They have to hold to their faith in Jesus if they want to be victorious. And that's a tremendous lesson for us as well. Because I have no doubt that the dragon uses some of the same tactics today. And you and I may face persecution for our faith, but we need to hold fast to Jesus no matter what comes. And we will be victorious because the Lamb is victorious. So I hope this helps you to see what is revealed about the great harlot and about the beast that comes up out of the sea. And I hope that you will be blessed in your studies. I pray that God would lead you as you study his word. Thanks for joining us.